Well, in 1960, which would be almost 100 years after the end of slavery, 22% of black kids grew up in homes with only one parent.
Just 22%.
Yes.
4 out of 5 were in homes with both parents.
Yes. 30 years later, after the liberal welfare state, that number had more than tripled. And so I said, well, let us compare, if we can speculate on how much that 22% was due to the legacy of slavery. But we know that that tripling was not due to the legacy of slavery. It was due to the legacy of a whole different set of policies. And you can look at it so many other ways. Education. Stuyvesant High School in New York, as you know, you get into only by passing a very tough exam. In 2012, the percentage of black students who had gotten into Stuyvesant High School was less than 1/10 of the percentage of black students who had gotten into Stuyvesant High School 33 years earlier.
I didn't know that.
There's Dunbar High School in Washington, which was an elite black high school for a very long time. In 1993, the number of kids out of Dunbar High School who went on to college was less than it was 60 years earlier, which would have been in the depth of the Great Depression.
That are raised without fathers. And that has every other social negative consequence connected to it. Crime, not being able to compete economically in the country, being more likely to be arrested, that's the number one problem facing the black community. And when I hear people tell me about systemic racism or unconscious racism, I always say, give me an example, and almost nobody can do it.
So the family stuff, so I'll follow your logic there on the family stuff. What can actually be done about that then? I mean, because that's a big
reverse the welfare state. In 1890, 1900, you look at census reports, a black kid, believe it or not, was slightly more likely to be born to a nuclear intact family than a white kid. Even during slavery, a black kid was more likely to be born under a roof with his biological mother and biological father than today. What's happened is we launched this so-called war on poverty in the 60s. Where literally Lyndon Johnson sent people knocking on doors. I lived in the 60s, and people knocked on doors apprising women of their availability to welfare, provided there was no man in the house. And we went from 25% of blacks being born outside of wedlock in 65 to 75% right now. And you look at how much money that we spent on welfare, and the lines are parallel. It was a neutron bomb dropped on this country, not just on the black community, but on people in general. At one time, only about 5% of whites were born outside of wedlock. Now 25% of whites are born outside of wedlock. I was in college in 1970, and there was a report called the Moynihan Report, The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. It's written by a liberal, by a man who became a Democratic senator from New York. And at the time, 25% of black kids were born outside of wedlock. He said, my God, this number is horrific. If we don't do something about it, it could get even higher. Well, fast forward, 25% of white kids are now born outside of wedlock. It is the number one problem in this country, and what we've done, in my opinion, is we've economically incentivized women to marry the government, and we've allowed men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And now we have this.
One of the problems with the black community is how we're perceived. So look, when we're talking about rap, when you compare it to the statistics, how 40% of violent crimes are committed by young black men. Hold on. It's a perception. It is a perception. When we talk about, you go on the internet and we talk about selling drugs, pimping women, armed trafficking, fraud, and all these things, and people who don't live in black neighborhoods, people who don't live in black neighborhoods, gentry neighborhoods, all they see is what they know online.
White House is
and it is a perception. And when we hear police officers, 40% of the police officers who were killed in the line of duty were killed by young black men. It is only reasonable sometimes, not saying this is bad, sometimes it is reasonable for a police officer to handle black men with a little bit more caution than it is for a 5'2" Chinese man, for instance.
Really think that Mr. Trump cares about you?
He's hired more black people than probably you have. Hired more Latinos, more Muslims than anybody else has. Obama's killed more Muslims than Donald Trump.
When he was Senator, Brooke, and he said that the Moses generation, the generation of Martin Luther King, had gotten us 90% of the way there. Our generation, he referred to his own generation as the Joshua generation, has to get us the rest of the 10%. Eric Holder has frequently talked about the pernicious racism in America, gave a speech a few weeks ago where he outlined what he called pernicious racism. It included things like photo voter ID, which most blacks support, different expulsion rates, which happens no matter what the school district is around the country, and he also mentioned different sentencing arrest rates when the Sentencing Commission, excuse me, he mentioned different sentencing rates when the commission has said that those different rates, and it is true that blacks are sentenced somewhat longer than whites for the same crime, but the reason are legitimate factors, including arrest records. So when you look at the racism that Obama talks about, I'm trying to figure out what exactly he is talking about that is as important as the problem of the absence of fathers in the black community.
As you point out, was
when I remove the feelings, when I remove myself from this narrative that CNN is trying to sell to us, when I remove myself from the emotional aspects, which, by the way, people ask me the question, how can you say it was okay that Philando Castile died and was shot by a police officer? I would never say that it was okay that Philando Castile died. I would never deny a horrific event. What I'm going to deny is your right to manipulate my emotions because a horrific event happened. For you to be able to control how I vote and how I view the world because a horrific event happened. In most circumstances, these events are anomalies. I just sat down to an interview with Mike.com. They're here, they're recording this, and the founder gave me a stat. He said, well, 990 black men were shot and killed by police in 2016. Yes, but only 16 of them were unarmed. A police officer has a right to shoot back to defend himself against somebody that's coming at him with a gun. So the stats of how many people died is irrelevant. The fact is how many unarmed black men were shot and killed by police officers in 2016. The answer is 16. That is 0.00004% of the black community. And we saw it every single night. You would think that police officers were just gunning down people based on the amount of melanin in their skin. The media was able to make people believe that this was something that was real, that this was a real threat that was posed to the black community, when in reality, you have a higher chance of getting struck by lightning than by being gunned down unarmed by a police officer. We launched a war on police officers in an effort to control the black vote. That's the facts.
I left the Democrat Party because I looked at our communities. I looked at slavery, and I looked at every single problem that we've ever occurred being black in America, and I attribute it to the Democrat Party. When you look back at slavery and the Democrats, it was the Democrats versus the Republicans, and the Republicans were the ones who were against slavery while the Democrats were for it. And then you look at Jim Crow and all the laws that were implemented under Democrat governments, governors and congressmen. And then I looked at our current urban plantations. I looked at our neighborhoods. I looked at how we have rapid crime and rapid poverty in our neighborhoods, and all our city officials are Democrats. I said, man, this is crazy. Why is all our representation for almost the last 100 years Democrats, and our community still look this way? I wanted something different for us. So I said we had to Blexit. We must exit, leave the black exit. We must leave today.
Growing up here, what do you attribute a lot of this gun and gang violence to?
Access to opportunity, and a lot of folks don't have access to any opportunity, so you feel trapped.
A combination of probably just, lack of resources, I would say family values, morals, things being taught, our parents teaching their children what's right, what's wrong, how valuable life is, how short life is, and different things you can accomplish in life. Do you want to live? I think it's just a combination of things.
Do you think there's a gun problem, or is it just more of a culture problem?
Culture. Yeah. Guns are gonna be there, man. People make excuses to use them, but
right,
they're gonna be there.
What do you make of Rahm Emanuel? I'm asking everybody because there's a lot of anger towards him right now.
We want someone else. That is what I think of him.
To take care of downtown, to take care of the north side, south and west side of the left.
Why do you think that is?
I don't want to say racial or anything like that, or economic stuff like that. It's just the way it is, I guess.
But I just became tired of looking at the state of our country and not seeing, definitely my people, I'm an African American, so-called African American, and not seeing any progress for our people. And it just always seemed to me like there is hands that are just helping our people not to get anywhere, far as education and in our communities, jobs, the prison system, under Clinton, the three strikes you're out. Definitely, I'm all over the place, but I'm shooting from the hip. And hopefully you will be able to understand what I'm talking about. I didn't write anything down, so this is just going straight off the dome. The stories I was hearing about the Haitians and how the Clintons went over there and robbed them. Of course, three strikes you're out. We have Obama, and then, people as myself, we looked at the color of the skin, and not just me looking at the color of his skin, it was just all the people around me and how they were going for Obama. So
power, that's a fucking problem, right? Oh my God, look at this racially inspired group from Donald Trump. No, I haven't been practicing. This is what I live. This is what I breathe. This is what I live in. I'm being honest with you. I'm being honest with you. You allow Black Lives Matter on campus, but you don't allow white power on campus. Why not? It's the same shit. Both are hate group, but neither are productive. So if you denounce one, denounce the other. Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. That's what it is. I'm being honest with you, bro. I'm being honest with you.
Are you kidding me?
Let me tell you something. Listen, but let me be honest with you. I just want to say this, right? I want to tell you something right now. African Americans make up 13% of the population, yet commit over 50% of the violent gun and drug crime in the United States.
And you don't think there's a problem with those?
No. That's true. It's 55%.
Okay.
Right? So 95% of that is to other blacks. So me as an African American, I have a 2,000 time more likelihood to be shot and killed by another black man leaving this event than I do by a white person, a police officer, and a neo-Nazi.
So you don't think that's a
2,000 times more percent. I mean, we're killing us as African Americans, we're killing each other. That's what the real fucking problem is.
This is a reverse mirror. She supposed to be talking.
I'm being honest with you. That's what the problem is. That's what the problem is. This is me and my brother right here. We got to stand together, man. Oh, but listen. I'm being honest. If Obama would have stood up and said, "Look, we're killing each other. We've got a problem within the African American community," he would have been phenomenal. But he's gonna make it white people and of course
she walked away.
Yeah, nothing there. You left, man. I'm being honest. I'm just being honest.
You're a young motherfucker.
The left is too busy playing identity politics.
I'm just being honest. I just had to say that, man. I'm being honest. I'm just completely honest. I'm 2,000 times more likely to be shot and killed by another black man leaving this event tonight, than I am any other race, color, creed, or police officer. That's where the fucking pain comes, man. That's sad. I can't hang out in black neighborhoods. I can't do that. I can't because it's a risk for me. It's a risk. It's sad. There's a problem within the African American community and it needs to be addressed. Obama didn't address it because he wanted the black vote, and Al Sharpton didn't address it because he's making millions of dollars off of victimizing African Americans. Trust me, I know how that is.
Why do African Americans support the more liberal of the two parties, the Democratic Party, at the rates of 90 and more percent? Why is the first African American president so deeply committed to promoting and extending liberal policies? Why is his African American Attorney General, again, so deeply committed to affirmative action and other? Why? This makes no sense.
I don't think we could be enough hours for you to answer all of those. But to take the political thing, one of the things I discovered in the research for my book I'm currently working on is that leaders of groups that are lagging in countries around the world almost invariably have counterproductive policies for them. And it makes perfect sense because insofar as members of lagging groups assimilate into the values and achievements of the larger society, they don't need those leaders. You see this. You look at the history of the Czechs in the 19th century. People are worried that the Czechs are all learning to speak German. Well, at that time, if you wanted to become a professional person, scientist, anything like that, you had to use books that were written in German.
Right.
Simply because the German acquired a volume of literature centuries ahead of Czech. And yet they fought tooth and nail against that. If you look at in Sri Lanka, one of the arguments that was made there to the Buddhist leaders was that if we don't do something, the Tamil minority will assimilate members of the Sinhalese majority, and then there'll be no Buddhists or Sinhalese in another several generations. And so, I mean, there's no mystery to me as to why Jesse Jackson says what he does, or Al Sharpton and others, because that benefits them, but it does not benefit the people they lead. And all the incentives are for leaders to lead people into things that don't help the people, but help the leaders.
What you'd create there would be an exception for Dr. King, though, wouldn't there?
Yes, but
one of the things he was different because he was earliest, or what? Why? What's different about it?
Well, it's like insurgent movements in general. When an insurgency starts off, by definition, it has an uphill battle. Now, and you can look at the history of Christianity, for heaven's sake. If you're going to be a Christian in the Roman Empire, before in the first century, you had a lot of grief to go through. Now, but after Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire, this is a bonanza. And there's a lot to be done. And so now you will follow policies that are the opposite of what you advocated.